The room was full of aliens who had never agreed on anything in 400 years of shared governance. And today, for the first time, every single one of them agreed on Cole Hardin. They agreed he had to go. The Galactic Multi-Species Labor Council met in a chamber so large that sound got tired halfway across it. Tall windows let in the pale light of Verith Prime's twin suns. Representatives from 19 species sat in curved rows, each one wearing the expression of a person who had recently stepped on something unpleasant. At the center of the floor, Counselor Dre Un, 4 arms, gray skin, and a voice like oiled machinery, read from a prepared document in a tone that was meant to sound fair and didn't come close. The human compliance officer known as Cole Hardin, Dre Un said, has, in the span of 14 months, filed enforcement actions against 11 registered operations across 6 sectors. He has cost member entities a combined total of 400 million galactic credits in fines, restructuring costs, and operational shutdowns. He let the number sit in the air. The Council, he continued, in the interest of expanding human integration into frontier compliance operations, proposes the reassignment of Officer Hardin to an extended survey posting on the planet designated Class-9. Nobody laughed. Nobody was meant to. There was a particular kind of cruelty that worked best when dressed in paperwork, and Dre Ewan had been dressing cruelty in paperwork for 30 years. Class-9 was a Class-9 world. There were 4 of them in the Galactic Survey. Class-9 meant the planet would kill you, had always killed everything sent to it, and was not interested in changing that policy. The last expedition had lasted 11 days. The one before that had lasted 3. The vote passed. It looked like something that had learned to smile from a manual. The GLESB field office at Port Adara smelled like recycled air and old coffee, which Dana Wills had decided was either deeply comforting or deeply depressing depending on the day. Today, it was depressing. She was sitting at her desk, pretending to read a maintenance compliance report from the Tarathi Outer Belt, when Pete Carver walked in with the look of a man carrying something heavy. Pete was Cole's supervisor in title only. In practice, Cole supervised himself, and Pete filed the paperwork afterward. He was a good man, Pete. Careful. Decent. The kind of person who delivered bad news in person because he thought it was the right thing to do, even when the other person was going to make it very strange for him. He found Cole at the back of the office, standing at a wide table covered in survey maps, running a yellow marker along a geological fault line on a planet 3 sectors away. "Cole," Pete said. Cole did not look up. The fault line on Droxy 4 runs closer to the processing plant than their last survey acknowledged. Someone measured it wrong, or someone reported it wrong, and I know which one I think it is. Cole. What? Pete put the reassignment order on the table. Cole looked at it. He picked it up. He read it the way he read everything. Start to finish. No expression. Full attention. Then he set it down. Is the geological survey data for Class-9 available in the standard filing system? Cole said. Or do I need to request supplemental documentation? Pete stared at him. Because if the supplemental archive is still locked under the Verath Classification Act, I will need to file a Form 7C before departure, and those take 11 days to process, so the sooner I know. Cole, it is a Class-9 world. They are sending you there to... I know what they are sending me there for. The room was quiet. Pete's mouth was still open. Cole turned back to the survey maps and picked up his marker. I am going to need a wider clipboard, Cole said. Across the office, Dana had not moved. She had her eyes on the Tarathi maintenance report. She had not read a single word of it in 4 minutes. I am not going with you, she said. She closed the report. She looked at Pete. She looked at Cole's back. She thought about the 11-day expedition. She thought about what it meant to be someone who filed reports with this man. who had watched him walk up to a Torathi foundry floor supervisor and tell him, in a flat Midwestern voice, that his facility was a staffing pipeline to the morgue, and that he had 30 days to fix it, or face full operational shutdown. She thought about what it meant to be the kind of person who watched that happen, and felt, despite everything, like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "Fine," she said, "but I am packing my own filtration gear." Cole spent 3 days preparing, not for survival, for the audit. He pulled every piece of documented data on Class-9 that existed in the Galactic Archive. There was not much. The original survey team's notes, the 11-day outpost report, filed by automated systems after the crew stopped filing anything at all, atmospheric readings, geological estimates, a biological survey that covered approximately 4% of the planet's landmass before the surveyor team evacuated at a speed that the report described as emergency expedient. He made lists, cross-referenced them, built a filing structure. Dana watched him do this from across the office and thought about the apex crawler species listed in the 4% biological survey. Animals the size of transit vehicles, armored, blind, chemoreceptors that could read a heartbeat at 200 meters. And she went home and did not sleep well. On the morning of departure, Vet Sorak arrived at the port. He was Sarathi, 6-limbed, exoskeleton the color of old bronze, compound eyes that caught light in 12 directions at once. He had been assigned as their planetary escort by the Council, which was either a gesture of good faith or the Council's way of removing an inconvenient alien at the same time as an inconvenient human. Veth Sorak had survived Class-9 twice, both times by sitting completely still inside a sealed container for the duration of the expedition. He had prepared a survival briefing, 47 pages. He had practiced it. He handed Cole a copy at the boarding gate. Cole tucked it under his arm without opening it. Veth Sorak's mandibles moved in a pattern that Dana had learned, in her 3 years working with Sorathi officials, meant something between deep offense and profound resignation. The shuttle lifted off. Below them, Port Adara shrank to a grid of lights, then to a smudge, then to nothing. Cole opened the geological survey. Dana watched the stars through the viewport. Veth Sorak began his briefing out loud, because apparently Cole not reading it was not going to stop him from delivering it. Class-9, Veth Sorak said, has a surface survival probability of less than 3% for any known sapient species beyond 72 hours. Cole turned a page. The atmospheric toxicity rating is a 7.4 on the standard scale. The megafauna density in the temperate zones is, does the mineral particulate in the lower atmosphere carry a respiratory hazard classification? Cole asked. Veth Sorak stopped. He checked his notes. Yes, Category B. Good, Cole said. He wrote something down. I will add it to the file. Dana pressed her forehead against the viewport glass. The planet appeared below them, massive, dark green-black, wrapped in cloud systems so large they looked like the planet was thinking. Something moved through the upper atmosphere. It was large enough to cast a shadow over the shuttle. Cole did not look up from the geological survey. Dana watched the shadow pass. She pulled out her own clipboard. The shuttle touched down in a clearing that the landing system sensors had identified as stable ground. It was wrong about this. Cole noted it in his field log before he opened the hatch. The soil composition readings showed a subsurface moisture level consistent with a drainage sink, which meant the ground was not stable. It was just firm enough on top to pass a basic sensor sweep. He flagged it as a landing hazard, Category C. He would upgrade it to Category B after the 3rd day, when the northwest corner of the clearing sank 4 inches overnight. He stepped out first. The air hit him like a damp towel that had been left in a biology lab. Heavy, warm, with something underneath the warmth that was not quite chemical and not quite organic, and was definitely not something the human nose had evolved to process comfortably. His filtration mask brought it down to manageable. He breathed through it and looked around. The ruins of the old research outpost were 15 meters ahead. 3 standing walls, 1 collapsed roof, equipment frames eaten to rust-colored skeletons by something that was either the atmosphere or the local fauna or both. The Galactic Archive listed the outpost as lasting 11 days before contact was lost. Standing here, Cole thought 11 days was optimistic. He walked toward it. Behind him, Dana stepped out of the shuttle and stood very still for exactly 2 seconds, the kind of stillness that is not calm but is pretending hard to be. And then she followed. That Sorok appeared in the shuttle hatchway, looked at the tree line, which was approximately 40 meters away, and doing something a tree line should not do. And then he sat back down in his seat and pulled the hatch to within 2 inches of closed. The ruin smelled like wet stone and something else. Cole moved along the perimeter, scanner in one hand, field log in the other. The first violation took 4 minutes to find. The outpost had been built directly over a geothermal vent. The heat signatures were still readable in the ground, faint, but there. The original survey team had either not checked or had checked and not reported, and Cole had a strong opinion about which one it was. He photographed the foundation anchors, which had been eaten through not by time, but by the vent's chemical output. He wrote, "Structural failure, predictable and predicted by available geological data." He underlined the word predictable. The emergency exits were installed backwards, both of them. A person running for the door in the dark would pull when they needed to push, and push when they needed to pull. And in an emergency on Class-9, that 1 second of confusion was all the planet needed. Cole photographed both doors. He wrote a note that was 2 words long. Inexcusable. Dangerous. He found the loading bay last. It opened toward a gap in the vegetation, a wide corridor through the black-green canopy that ran northeast toward what the biological survey had labeled, in the cautious language of people who were scared and trying not to show it, as a primary megafauna transit route. The loading bay faced it like a welcome mat. He wrote, "Loading access point oriented toward documented megafauna corridor. Recommend immediate remediation. Recommend also basic common sense." Dana had been watching the tree line the whole time. The tree line had not stopped moving. It was a slow movement, irregular, nothing like wind. Something large, working through the undergrowth at a distance she could not quite calculate, because the canopy was too dense, and the scale of everything on this planet was wrong in a way that made her eyes keep adjusting and readjusting. "Cole," she said. "Noted," he said. "Cole, that is not a tree." "Also noted." She looked at him. He had not looked up from his scanner. She looked back at the tree line and decided that if she was going to be afraid, she was going to be afraid quietly and efficiently, because panicking on Class-9 was the sort of thing that turned a 3% survival probability into something with fewer digits. The thing at the tree line moved forward. It came out of the canopy the way a building comes out of fog, gradually and then all at once. The biological survey had described them in careful, neutral language. Large, chitin-armored hexapods, primary sensory apparatus chemoreceptive, estimated mass between 4 and 8 metric tons, apex predators with no documented natural threats on the planet. Reading that in the archive had been one experience. Watching one walk toward her across a clearing of sinking ground on the most dangerous planet in the known galaxy was a different kind of experience entirely. Her hand went flat against the shuttle hull behind her. She pressed it there and did not move. Cole watched it on his scanner. Mass reading, 6.2 metric tons. Movement pattern, direct approach, no lateral variation. Ground vibration, rhythmic, heavy, confident. The chemoreceptors on its forward segment swept back and forth in a slow arc, tasting the air. It stopped 2 meters from Cole. It was close enough that he could see the texture of its armor plating, layered like the scales on a pine cone, Each plate a slightly different color, as if the animal had been assembled from parts of different worlds. The chemoreceptors moved over him. It was reading him the way he read a compliance report. Start to finish. Full attention. No expression. Cole stood still. He held the scanner level. He watched the readings. He did not write anything for 30 seconds, which was the longest he had gone without writing something since they landed. The crawler turned. It walked back toward the tree line. At the edge of the canopy it paused, the way a person pauses in a doorway. And then, it was gone. Dana let out a breath that seemed to have been saving up for about a minute. Cole wrote, "Megafauna response to stillness. Consistent deterrence behavior. Not documented in existing biological survey. Gap in archive data. Recommend update." He looked up at Dana. "They respond to stillness," he said. "That is a significant finding. The old survey team probably moved too much." Dana looked at the empty tree line. "Cole," she said, "you were 2 meters from a 6-ton animal." 6.2, he said, "and it left, which tells us something useful." He turned back toward the ruins and kept walking. Dana stared at the space where the crawler had been. She thought about the survey team that had lasted 11 days. She thought about whether they had stood still or run, and she thought she probably knew the answer. She pushed herself off the shuttle hull. Inside the hatch, Veth had watched all of this through the 2-inch gap. His compound eyes had not blinked. His mandibles were doing the Sarathi equivalent of a person gripping a chair arm so hard their knuckles go white. He had survived Class-9 twice before, both times inside a sealed container. Both times he had told himself that was the smart way to survive it, and that anything else was not survival. It was gambling with biology. He watched Cole walk back into the ruins. He thought about his 47-page briefing, which Cole had still not opened. He pulled the hatch to within 1 inch of closed. Then, after a moment, he pulled it back to 2 inches. He watched. By the end of day 1, Cole had documented 19 violations in the ruins alone. By the end of day 2, he had mapped the crawler's migration corridor, cross-referenced it with the outpost's original construction permits, and filed a preliminary flag against the 3 council members who had signed off on those permits. By the end of day 3, Veth had come outside. He stood at the shuttle ramp, both lower arms folded tight against his body, the other 4 braced against the hull. He did not move far. But he watched Cole work his way methodically through the ruins, scanner raised, field log open, writing things down in the same flat, unhurried way he did everything. The planet made its sounds around them. Things in the canopy, things in the ground. The geothermal vent breathed a warm chemical sigh up through the ruins every 40 minutes, regular as a clock. Dana had timed it. Veth had decided that whatever humans were, they were something the galactic classification system had not yet found the right category for. On day 4, Dana found him at the edge of the bioluminescent marsh at the far side of the ruins, sitting on a piece of broken outpost wall, writing by hand. The marsh was blue-white in the early dark. Fungi the size of umbrellas pulsed soft light along the water's edge. Something in the water moved in long, slow arcs, just below the surface. It was beautiful. It was the kind of beautiful that made you understand, somewhere in the back of your brain, that the universe had not designed beauty for your benefit. Cole was writing. Dana sat down next to him. She did not say anything for a while. 31 violations so far, he said. I know, she said. I filed the copies. The geothermal vent runs northeast. If it connects to the ridge system the way the core samples suggest, there is a secondary vent field under the northern continent that no survey has ever reached. She looked at the glowing water. We are going to the northern continent, she said. It was not a question. We are going to the northern continent, he said. She nodded once. She pulled out her clipboard. She added it to the route plan. Pete Carver had worked for the Galactic Labor and Environmental Standards Bureau for 19 years. In that time, he had read thousands of field reports. He had read reports about collapsing mine shafts, chemical leaks, structural failures, labor violations in 17 different languages and 12 different atmospheric compositions. He was not easily surprised by what people found when they looked carefully at something. Cole Hardin was making him reconsider that. He sat at his desk in the Port Adara office on day 3 of the Class-9 posting and read the first full report out loud, because the Galactic Council had sent an observer, a small green-scaled Verath official named San, who sat in the chair across from Pete's desk with a datapad and an expression that had started the morning as politely bored and was now something harder to name. Day 3, Pete read. 38 documented environmental and structural hazards, confirmed. Additionally, this officer has identified a predictable atmospheric event, the toxic fungal bloom, previously classified in all available survey data as irregular and unforeseeable. It is neither. The bloom follows a 14-day biological cycle that is mathematically consistent across all available atmospheric readings going back 60 years. This cycle was documented in the original outpost's own research logs. Those logs were filed with the Galactic Survey Archive, and based on the outpost's subsequent fate, appear to have never been reviewed by anyone responsible for the crew's safety. The outpost was lost on day 11. The bloom's next cycle peaks on day 12. Pete set the report down. Observer San was writing something on the datapad. His pen moved fast. "There are follow-up reports," Pete said. San looked up. "Several," Pete said. Day 5 arrived on Cole's End as a gray sky morning, with the geothermal vent doing its 40-minute exhale, and something large moving in the upper canopy that had been moving there since day 2 and had not come any closer, which Cole considered either territorial behavior or professional courtesy, and was not sure which interpretation he preferred. He and Dana had pushed east along the coastline of the planet's primary continent, following a chemical trace in the soil that had showed up on day 4 in routine sediment sampling. It was the signature of industrial runoff, the specific molecular pattern that heavy extraction orbital mining left in soil and water when the waste management systems either failed or were simply not installed in the first place. Whatever was in it had been going in for a long time. "How long?" she said. Cole was reading the sediment core. The contamination layers start approximately 80 years down. He paused. "Whoever did this started 80 years ago and has not stopped." She looked at the water. "Who owns the orbital mining operations in this sector?" she said. Cole pulled out a different document. He had printed the corporate registry for this sector before departure, because he printed everything before departure, and took it with him in hard copy, because hard copy could not be remotely deleted. 2 of the names on the primary ownership group are current members of the Galactic Council. Dana turned to look at him. He wrote it all down. He wrote it down carefully, with the column references and the registration numbers and the shell company names in the correct order. He photographed the pages. He saved 3 copies on separate devices and sealed a 4th copy in the hard case evidence pouch he carried on his belt. "Cole," Dana said. "I know," he said. "They knew what was in this ocean. They sent you here knowing." "Yes." She watched him keep writing. "That does not make you angry?" she said. He finished the line he was writing. He looked up at the dark water. "It makes me thorough," he said. Pete read the Day 5 report to Observer San in a different tone than he had read the Day 3 report. The Day 3 tone had been careful and neutral. By Day 5, he had stopped working to keep his voice flat. San was no longer writing on the datapad. He was sitting very still. When Pete finished reading, neither of them spoke for a moment. "Is there a Day 7 report?" San asked. "Yes," Pete said. "Read it." Pete found it. He cleared his throat. Day 7, Northern Continent Interior Survey, Zone 4. This officer has identified the physical remains of a weapons testing site in an area for which no testing authorization exists in the Galactic Archive. Chemical residue analysis indicates munition types consistent with. He paused. He looked at the report. He looked at San. He looked at the report again. Consistent with classes of ordnance prohibited under the Vareth Accords. The room was quiet. The Vareth Accords, San said, as if checking that he had heard correctly. Yes, Pete said. San put the datapad face down on his knee. He looked at the wall for a long moment, with the expression of a person doing a very fast and very unpleasant calculation. There is a Day 9 report, Pete said. San looked at him. You are going to want to hear the Day 9 report, Pete said. He was, despite everything, smiling slightly. He had known Cole Hardin for 11 years. He had filed the paperwork on the Tarathi Foundry and the Droxy Orbital Hub and the Sarathi Ceremonial Site. He had watched Cole walk into rooms where powerful people sat and say true things in a quiet voice and leave those rooms with the walls rearranged. He had sometimes, in his more honest moments, thought that Cole was the most dangerous person he had ever met. Not because Cole was cruel or ruthless or political, because Cole simply did not stop. He did not calculate who was watching or what it would cost him. He looked at a thing, wrote down what he saw, and moved to the next thing. Pete read the Day 9 report. On Karath 9, in a collapsed section of the northern continent's interior forest, Cole and Dana had found a survival shelter that was not on any map. Inside it, wrapped in 3 layers of emergency thermal fabric, eating protein paste from a kit that was 8 years past its printed expiry date, was a Droxy researcher named Ven. Ven had been with the last authorized expedition to Karath 9. He had been separated from the group during an emergency evacuation, accidentally, the official record said. The record also said he was presumed dead. He was not dead. He had survived 11 years on Karath 9 by watching the megafauna and doing what they did, following their patterns, staying in the spaces they left behind. He had 4,000 pages of notes. Cole's Day 9 report concluded, subject is malnourished, but coherent and oriented. Observational data collected during the survival period is the most comprehensive biological survey of Karath 9 ever produced. This data would have prevented the original outpost's loss if it had existed at the time of construction. Recommend immediate medical evacuation. Recommend formal whistleblower protection filing. Recommend someone explain to this man that the people who left him here are currently sitting on the Galactic Council. Pete looked up from the report. Observer San had stood up. He was pacing. His scaled hands were moving in a way that meant, in Vareth body language, something between outrage and the kind of fear that comes from knowing exactly who is in trouble. How many council members? San said. Pete checked Cole's documentation file. He has named 3 so far. The contamination ownership trail leads to 2. The testing site permits were signed by a 3rd. Andre Uwen. The original assignment authorization. The Karath 9 posting was his proposal. San stopped pacing. He proposed sending the auditor to a planet that council members had been using for illegal operations for 80 years, San said slowly, as if each word needed to be examined before he put it down. That is what the documentation shows, Pete said. They looked at each other. There is a Day 12 report, Pete said. San sat back down. Of course there is, he said. The northern continent's deep interior was a different world from the coastal ruins where they had landed. The trees here, if they were trees, which Cole was not entirely sure of because their root systems behaved more like a single organism than a collection of separate plants, were so tall that the canopy was lost in the low cloud cover. The ground between them was layered, first the soil, then something that moved slightly under pressure like a living mat, then deeper down a slow warm vibration that came from the geology and never stopped. That Sorok had come this far. That was something. He walked 3 meters behind Cole and Dana at all times, with all 6 limbs tense in the way that Sarathi exoskeletons went tense when the nervous system was producing too much threat response chemistry to process normally. He had stopped talking after day 8. Not sulking, he was past sulking. He had gone quiet in the specific way of a person who has decided that talking uses energy better spent on watching. Cole appreciated this. He did not say so. Dana stayed on Cole's left, scanner raised, cross-referencing the soil chemistry readings against the sediment maps she had been building since day 4. The contamination trail had followed them north, not because the source was here. The source was in orbit, always had been, but because this planet was small enough and old enough that 80 years of discharge had worked its way into everything. The rivers carried it. The water table held it. The soil was full of it the way old wood is full of the smell of smoke from fires that burned decades ago. On day 11, they found what Cole had started to suspect they would find. It was in a wide clearing that the plant mat did not cover. Bare rock, gray-orange, with a specific kind of scarring that Dana recognized before Cole did, because she had spent 2 years in the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Corps had taught her, among other things, what rock looks like after very large things explode near it. Blast pattern, she said. Consistent with high-yield ordnance testing, Cole said. He was already scanning. Multiple detonation sites, at least 9 distinct events, based on the crater geometry. He walked the perimeter, photographing. The chemical residue is the same signature as Zone 4. Same era. Same source. Whoever was mining this sector was also testing weapons on it, Dana said. Using the remoteness of a Class-9 Deathworld as cover, Cole said. A world nobody was authorized to inspect. A world where anything that went wrong could be attributed to the planet itself. He stood in the center of the clearing. He looked around at the blast-scarred rock and the container of evidence pouches he was carrying, and the clipboard that was now on its 3rd refill of pages. Except, he said, for the part where someone had to sign the mining permits, and the orbital access licenses, and the waste discharge waivers, which are categorized as emergency environmental exceptions and require countersignature from a sitting council member. He opened the permit file he had printed before departure, the one that no one could delete remotely because it was paper. 3 names. He photographed it. 3, Dana said. 3, he confirmed. Behind them, Veth Sorak made a sound. Not words. Just a sound, deep in his thorax, that communicated something between, "This is bad," and "I knew this was bad," and "I do not know what to do with knowing this was bad." Cole turned to him. "Veth," he said. He had started using the short form on day 8, and Veth Sorak had not objected, which Cole took as a reasonable sign of functional trust. "Do you know what is in the geological survey for the northern continent, below 4 kilometers?" Veth Sorak's compound eyes moved. The deep survey was never completed. Funding was cut. "Funding was cut," Cole said, in the tone of a man noting something for a file. "By whom?" Veth Sorak was quiet. "By whom?" Cole said again. Not harder, just still there. "The survey contract was managed through the Council's Interior Science Committee," Veth Sorak said. "The committee chair at the time was Dre Un," Cole said. Veth Sorak said nothing. Cole wrote it down. What the incomplete geological survey had not found, and what Cole found on day 12 with a core drill and 4 hours of patience, was a secondary geothermal vent system running under the entire northern continent. Not one vent, not 3, a network. It connected to the primary vent under the old outpost ruins. It connected to the tectonic grid along the eastern ridge, and it had been destabilized, not by natural geological process, but by 80 years of deep extraction orbital mining that had pulled material from the crust in exactly the wrong places. Class-9 had not always been a Class-9 world. 102 years ago, it was a Class-6. Difficult, dangerous, but survivable, with preparation. The apex crawlers were here then. The toxic blooms were here. The atmosphere was hard. But Class-6 meant it was in the range of survivable frontier territory, which meant it was in the range of things the galactic community might eventually want to do something with. Survey it, study it, maybe one day settle a small research outpost and build from there. Class-9 was different. Class-9 meant nobody came. Class-9 meant no inspections, no surveys, no compliance obligations. Class-9 was as good as invisible to the law. Someone had wanted Class-9 to be invisible. Cole's core drill samples told the story in layers, the way geology always did, honest, in sequence, without any interest in protecting anyone. The mining discharge had changed the ocean chemistry, which had changed the atmospheric chemistry, which had accelerated the fungal bloom cycles. The weapons testing had fractured the rock geometry of the deep ridge. The deliberate introduction of additional megafauna species. He found the transport crate records in a half-buried equipment dump on day 13. Sealed in weatherproof cases someone had meant to retrieve and never did. Had destabilized the existing ecological balance and pushed the surface danger rating from a manageable 6 to a catastrophic 9. A Class-9 world made on purpose. Cole sat with the core samples spread around him, and the transport crate records photographed, and the geological timeline written out in the back of his field log, and thought about the last auditor. The one who had been sent to a Class-6 world and quit. He thought about the outpost crew who had lasted 11 days. He thought about Ven, the Droxy researcher, alone in the forest for 11 years with 4,000 pages of notes and a survival kit 8 years past expiry. He thought about Dre Un's smile in the council chamber footage he had watched before departure. The smile of a man who had found an elegant solution. Cole closed his field log. "I am going to need more evidence pouches," he said. Dana handed him 3 without a word. Back at Portadara, Pete Carver's terminal began receiving the final compiled report on day 14 at 0600 local time. It came in as a standard GLESB encrypted transmission. The file size was large. Pete opened it, started reading the summary page, and then stopped reading and started counting the violation count at the top of the document. 312. He sat back in his chair. The GLESB automatic enforcement system ran a threshold scan on every submitted audit report. The thresholds were written into the system at the Bureau's founding, by human administrators who had decided, after watching several important reports get buried by political pressure, that some levels of violation were too serious to require human approval to act on. The system would simply act. Pete watched the threshold triggers fire. First one, second, 5th, 9th, 17th. Each one sent an automatic notification to the relevant enforcement bodies. The Galactic Environmental Quarantine Board, the Multi-Species Criminal Accountability Office, the Verith Accords Enforcement Division, the Corporate Registry Audit Authority, the Council Internal Affairs Secretariat. Each one copied every party named in the filing, including Councillor Dre Un, including the 2 council members whose names were on the mining permits, including the council member who had countersigned the discharge waivers. Pete called Dana on a private channel. She picked up on the first ring. She was still on the surface, waiting for the shuttle's second departure window. "You need to watch your terminal," he said. "How many triggers?" she said. 17 so far. "It is still counting." She was quiet for a second. "Is Pete enjoying himself?" "Pete is extremely professional," he said. "Pete, yes," he said. "A great deal." The terminal chimed. 18th trigger, 19th, 23rd. In the council chamber on Verith Prime, A notification arrived in Dre Yoon's official inbox. Then another. Then 6 more, in 4 minutes. His aide came in and started to say something, and then stopped, because the expression on Dre Yoon's face was the expression of a man watching a wall he had built very carefully fall in the direction he had been most afraid of. The 41st notification was a direct message from Cole Hardin, formatted with the standard GLESB header and the official bureau seal. It read, "Please be advised that under Article 14 of the Galactic Labor and Safety Accords, any party named in an active compliance enforcement action is prohibited from interfering with Bureau personnel or operations. I look forward to your cooperation. Officer C. Hardin, GLESB Frontier Division." Dre Yoon read it 3 times. He set down the datapad. He looked at his office wall, which was decorated with commendations and council portraits, and a mounted piece of ceremonial Sarathi stonework that had cost more than most people's annual salary. He thought about how elegant the Class-9 assignment had seemed. How clean. Send the auditor to a Deathworld. The planet does what Class-9 planets do. No auditor. No more reports. No more problems. The problem with elegant solutions, he was learning at age 94, was that they assumed the other party would cooperate with the elegance. Cole Hardin was not elegant. Cole Hardin was thorough. The Galactic Environmental Quarantine Board met in emergency session 31 hours after receiving Cole's compiled report. The meeting lasted 4 hours. The vote on the Class-9 remediation order took 11 minutes, which was fast for the board, and would have been faster if 2 of the members had not needed a short recess to read the section of the filing that detailed how the planet had been deliberately degraded, because they needed to read it twice to believe it, and once more after that, just to be sure. The order went out system-wide at 1400 Varus Standard Time. A Class-9 planetary remediation order was not the same as a standard quarantine. A standard quarantine said, "This place is dangerous, stay away." A remediation order said, "This place was made dangerous. Here is who made it, and here is the process by which they are going to pay to fix it." In the 412 years of the Galactic Archive, no Class-9 world had ever received a remediation order. The Class-9 designation had always meant natural, a world that had simply come out of its formation dangerous, and stayed that way. There was no category in the archive for a world that had been pushed into Class-9 status by deliberate industrial and military action over the course of a century. The archive created a new category that afternoon. It named it after the filing that had established it: the Hardin Classification. Cole would not find out about this for 2 years. When he did, he would say, "That seems like a reasonable name for it," and go back to what he was doing. On Class-9, Day 14 began the same as every other day. The geothermal vent breathing its warm chemical sigh. The canopy moving in its slow rhythmic way that had nothing to do with weather. The sky doing the dark green-gray thing it did in the early morning, when the 3 moons were still close enough to pull at the cloud systems. Cole packed his equipment in the order he always packed it. Evidence pouches in the hard case first. Field logs in the waterproof sleeve. Geological samples in the padded carrier. Scanner in its belt holster. Clipboard, the 3rd one of the trip, both previous ones having been retired to the evidence archive, in his left hand. Dana carried the sample carrier and her own pack, and the copy of Ven's 4,000 pages of observational data, which Cole had scanned, but also kept in hard copy, because hard copy could not be remotely deleted, and also because Ven had written it by hand, and it felt wrong to leave it on a planet. Ven was already on the shuttle. He had been carried there 2 days ago, and was currently in the care of a GLESB medical officer, who had arrived on the resupply run, and who had looked at his condition, and then looked at Cole and Dana, and said, in the flat way of people who are maintaining professionalism in the face of strong feelings, "How is he alive?" "He watched the megafauna," Cole said. The medical officer had not known what to do with that. Vet Sorak walked beside Cole on the path back to the landing site. He was different now than he had been on day one. He still held himself tensely. That was apparently just how Vexorok was, and Cole had stopped expecting it to change. But the tension was a different kind. Not fear. More like the posture of someone carrying something they were not sure yet what to do with. He had survived Class-9 twice before, in a sealed container, still as stone. It had felt both times like an ordeal, like something to get through and get away from as fast as possible, and never think too hard about. This had not felt like that. He was not sure yet what it had felt like. He was going to need some time with the question. The apex crawler was at the edge of the clearing when they arrived. The same one from day one. Cole was fairly confident of this, based on the scar pattern on its fourth armor plate, which he had noted and photographed on day one, and had been looking for since. It was sitting the way the crawler sat when they were not moving, which was almost indistinguishable from a large rock, except for the slow sweep of the chemoreceptors. Cole stopped. He looked at the crawler. The crawler's chemoreceptors swept toward him and held there. He nodded once. Not a performance, not a gesture for anyone else's benefit. Just a nod, the way a person nods at someone they have been working in the same building with for 2 weeks and are now leaving. The chemoreceptors swept back to center. Cole walked to the shuttle. Dana watched all of this happen from 3 steps behind him. She did not say anything. She filed it in the part of her memory reserved for things she was going to think about for a long time. Vexorok stood at the foot of the shuttle ramp. He turned and looked back at the clearing, at the ruins, the bioluminescent marsh just visible at the tree line's edge, the crawler sitting motionless at the clearing's perimeter. He held the look for 3 seconds. Then he made a sound, low in his thorax, a single click of his mandibles, the Sarathi gesture that meant something like, "I saw something here I do not have words for yet, and I am keeping it." He boarded the shuttle. The council chamber on Varath Prime was full in a way it was not usually full. Every seat occupied, every gallery seat occupied. Species who had not sent a representative to a full council session in 20 years had sent one today. The news relays had been running the story for 48 hours. The Deathworld, the Audit, the 41 notifications, the remediation order. The archive's new category. The names on the mining permits, out in the public record now, attached to everything Cole had documented. Dre-Un's seat was empty. It had been empty since Notification 39, when the Multi-Species Criminal Accountability Office had formally advised him that he was the subject of an active investigation, and that travel off Varath Prime was not currently advisable. He was in his private residence 3 kilometers from the council building, reading the same document over and over, and not finding anything in it that helped. Cole walked to the podium in the same clothes he had been wearing in the field. Not because he had not been given time to change. He had been given time. He had used it to complete the executive summary. He put his report on the podium. 312 pages, tabbed and indexed, plus the supplemental evidence archive, plus Ven's 4,000 pages, flagged with his own annotations. The room was quiet enough. This planet was a Class 6 world 102 years ago, he said. Page 7 lists the entities responsible for changing that classification. Page 140 names 3 individuals with current council seats connected to those entities. The enforcement actions have been filed through the automatic bureau system and are no longer within the council's authority to modify or withdraw. He turned a page. The geological remediation timeline for returning Class-9 to Class 6 status is estimated at 40 to 60 years, assuming consistent remediation effort. The responsible parties have been assessed for the remediation fund contribution, as outlined in Section 9 of the filing. He turned another page. The Droxy researcher Ven, who survived 11 years on the planet after being left behind by a council-authorized expedition, has been evacuated and is in medical care. His observational data will be published through the Bureau's open archive. It is the most comprehensive biological study of Class-9 megafauna ever produced. He looked up at the room. Are there questions about the audit methodology? The silence that followed was the kind that happens when a room full of people all have the same thought at the same time, and none of them want to be the first to say it. The thought was something like, he is going to keep doing this. Whatever this is, he is going to keep doing it. One of the junior council members, a young Verith woman named Soli, raised her hand and asked about the timeline for corporate registry review in light of the shell company findings. It was a genuine question, procedurally serious, the kind of question someone asks when they actually intend to do something with the answer. Cole told her, clear and simple. She wrote it all down. The enforcement actions ran for 2 years through the galactic legal system. 3 sitting council members resigned. 2 were removed by their home species governing bodies after the public record made it untenable to do anything else. The Sarathi corporate entity behind the mining operations was dissolved, its assets redirected to the Class-9 Remediation Fund, which was the largest single planetary restoration fund in galactic history. Then's observational data was published in full. Within a year, it had been downloaded more times than any document in the GLESB archive. Biological research teams began applying for Class-9 survey access under the new remediation framework. The apex crawler behavioral patterns then had documented were formally classified and named. One of them, the stillness response that Cole had observed on day 1 and noted as a gap in the existing data, was named the Hardened Stillness Protocol. Cole found out about this 3 years later, when Dana sent him a message with the archive link and no additional text. He read the entry. He looked at the name. He thought about the crawler at the edge of the clearing on day 14, the chemoreceptors holding steady, the nod. That is a good name for it, he said, to no one in particular. Then he went back to work. Pete Carver found the hazard pay request on his desk the morning after Cole returned. 1 page, perfectly formatted, 12 cited clauses of the GLESB compensation code, 3 Galactic Labor Accords provisions, and 1 precedent case from 40 years ago involving a human inspector on a Class 7 volcanic world. At the bottom of the notes field, Cole had written, the planet's megafauna did not require a hazard rating adjustment. They were, on balance, more cooperative than the council. Pete read it twice, approved it, and called Dana. She picked up on the first ring. He already left, she said. Pete had expected this. Where? There is a Class 7 world in the Droxy Frontier sector, she said. No compliance inspection in 60 years. He found the posting in the archive. Naturally. He asked if I was coming. The line was quiet for a moment that was exactly 1 beat too long to be simple thinking. Are you? Pete said. Another beat? I need a wider clipboard, she said. She hung up. Pete sat back in his chair. Outside the Portadara office windows, the twin suns of this sector were making the morning sky the particular pale gold they made when the atmosphere was clean and the day was going to be fine. He thought about Cole on a shuttle right now, somewhere in the jump corridor, reading whatever geological survey he had pulled on the Class 7 world. He thought about whoever on that planet had been running things unchecked for 60 years and had no idea what was coming. He thought, they never do. He approved the hazard pay. He filed the paperwork. He made coffee. He waited for the first report.